Welcome to Ordinary Teachers and Students, where we get to hear teachers and students tell us their extraordinary stories. My hope is that through this podcast, ordinary teachers from around the world can relate to the stories they hear and get some timely suggestions and ideas. My name is Alan Cheng, and I'm a secondary school teacher in the UK, a life coach, and a former university lecturer. My mission is to make the education system a better place for all. Today, I'm delighted to invite Bobo Ho onto our podcast. Bobo has just graduated from high school and, at the time of recording, received her Hong Kong DSE results just last week. Incredibly, she achieved 5 double stars in English language, which put her in the top 1% of all candidates in Hong Kong. So I've never taught Bobo, but I knew about her because of her various leadership positions at the school, particularly in the choir. I also poached her for the English debating team. I'm excited to hear from Bobo as she's about to embark on her post-secondary journey. So let's welcome Bobo. Hi, Bobo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Anything to add to that intro?
No, sums up everything mostly about what I do.
I have a really quick question about leadership that I wanted to ask you because because you're quite a tall person, if I'm honest, and I'm just curious whether you've always been that tall, like since young, as in like have you been taller than your peers most of the time?
From primary school, I was always like the tallest in the class, and then in secondary school, I was still tallest till Form 3. When Form 4, when everyone started hitting puberty, then I started being short.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that question was just simply about leadership. I was wondering whether you felt that your height gave you like a sort of an advantage in terms of leadership position. So whether teachers chose you for leadership positions just because, oh, you seem kind of the taller or the bigger person in the class.
I wouldn't say so because when I was doing leaderships as well, there were actually leaders who I knew who were really great leaders, but they were shorter than me. So I kind of leadership isn't on how you look, it is how you present yourself, and the confidence you have in your voice, in your ability, and just your public speaking and communication skills that really makes you good leader. That's my opinion. Yeah.
So very true. All right. So shall we go back to your primary school days first then? So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself in primary school? So I know quite a bit about Bobo in secondary, but nothing about Bobo in primary.
So actually in primary school, it was contradicting what I am in secondary school. Primary school Bobo was a very background character. I was just very ordinary. I wasn't in any school teams. My grades weren't particularly the best as well. It was really ordinary. I was just very ordinary. So then it was very to blend into the background. So compared to secondary school and primary school, not many teachers knew me or knew who I was. So that was the biggest difference between primary and secondary school.
Sure. Was there anything in particular that you remember about primary school? I mean, it seems like you're quite an ordinary student, like you said, blended in the background. Anything else?
I remember in primary school, I always never felt like I truly fit in because I was around a lot. I was in a local like Chinese primary school. So then my Chinese wasn't even the best. So a lot of people are speaking Cantonese, and I always felt like I wasn't truly fitting in because I was more like westernized. I mostly spoke English, but I had a few. Luckily, I wasn't the only like I'm not NCS. I'm local, but I just suck at Chinese. But luckily, there were a few NCS in my school who later on came to the same secondary school as me and became like my like really close friends. So thanks to them, I didn't feel truly left out, and I was still able to maintain my English speaking abilities. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious how that happened. Like, so you were saying that you mostly spoke English. You're kind of more westernized than a typical Hong Kong student, right? How did that like happen? Was it just your family upbringing or?
So it was a shock to a lot of my parents, not my parents, a lot of my teachers during Parents' Day as well. My parents can't speak English. Like, I remember my class teachers a lot of times were like, "Wait, you and your sister can speak perfect English, but why can't your parents speak English? And it was
Mm,
because my mom, when I was a kid, took me to a lot of tutorial lessons for
mm,
English. And
mm,
she knew that Hong Kong was going to be a metropolitan. A lot of
mm,
international businesses were coming, and they're like,
mm,
for my future, it would be best if I knew English.
mm,
So
mm,
that I given a lot of like English platforms to watch. Like YouTube was all English for me. I was watching
mm.
English shows. I was going to English tutorial lessons. So
Right.
I just grew up speaking English, and then I started speaking English with Tommy and
Mm,
my sibling. So
mm,
then we grew up speaking English together. So actually at home, it's very funny because I speak Chinese to my parents, to my relatives, but to Tommy, it's like we're in our own world where we just speak
mm,
English. Yeah.
mm. And then you can use English to talk about your parents, right?
We, yeah, true.
Mm,
Sometimes.
interesting. So, how's the transition to secondary then? I mean, you kind of hinted on it just now by saying that some of your friends from primary moved with you to secondary. So, do you want to describe that a little bit?
I think in Form 1, I was also still trying to fit in. I was trying to figure out who I was because I was in a new school and all that. I was figuring who I was. I was trying to do my best. And I think a great thing about going to secondary school was because everything was now English.
Mm,
I actually, fortunately, was able to excel really well. I was able
mm,
to comprehend questions finally because everything in
mm,
primary was in Chinese or Putonghua. So
mm,
then I excelled really well academically. So I think that was the best, or yeah, the one of a great achievements.
mm,
A lot of people. I went to NCF class, so I was in the class with full of international students. So I was
mm,
able to fully use my English abilities, and I was able to meet a lot of great people who, till this day, I still talk to. They're like really important people in my life, and I
mm,
love them to death. Yeah.
That's so
So
nice to hear.
yeah,
So it seems like you really enjoyed your secondary school days. Like, I mean, obviously now that you've got your results, looking back
yeah,
now, 6 years become like a block of memory.
yeah.
Any particular highlights or lowlights?
Highlights, I would say a lot of school teams. So I was
Mm,
very fortunate enough for teachers in my school who saw my potential and actually gave me a lot of leadership opportunities. And I was able to find myself there in leadership and find myself in a lot of school teams. So
mm,
I had a lot of fun just joining different school teams, being a part of leading, meeting people, learning how to cooperate,
mm,
teamwork, how to build my own like image and my
mm,
confidence in speaking and organization highlight a big highlight, and also getting my DS
mm.
was a big highlight because that
Of
was
course,
crazy.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Lowlights would be there was a period of time because I was saying I was a part of a lot of school teams
Mm,
that I
mm,
stretched myself really thin, and I was
mm.
very out for Form 4 and Form 5, especially when I got into Form 4,
Yeah,
extremely burnt out because I was in 7 school teams. And
yeah, yeah.
5 of them I had leadership positions, so I was extremely burnt out. And on top of that, I
Mm,
was also having to tackle my academics,
mm,
leadership role. It was just too much for me. So there was a time where I
yeah.
actually like spiraled a lot mentally as
Mm,
well.
Sure, sure.
That's a
Thanks for sharing
low.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
I do remember like when I poached you for the debate team, that was one of my biggest concerns because like I said, I mean, I didn't teach you, but the one thing I did know that was that you had so many roles around the school. So when I approached you about joining the debate team, I was very wary that, oh, maybe it might be adding another team onto you. I mean, when you think back to, let's say, S4 then, so do you regret joining so many teams, or do you think it was just part of the whole process of like learning about how to manage your own schedule and manage your own workload kind of thing?
Now I'm in the mindset where I don't think a lot of things I regret
Mm,
because without going through Form 4, without learning about, without, in a way, like without burning myself out, without knowing how it feels, I
mm,
wouldn't in the future know to not stretch myself so thin. Or
mm,
it was because I was doing that that I was able to know my limit and
mm,
know that
mm.
gotta be the best version, like the best mentally for myself, so that
Yeah.
I can lead. the teams well so that I can be like the best version for my teammates, for my teachers. So it was because of that that I learned this. So I wouldn't regret not joining a lot of school teams, but it would be like I wouldn't do that again.
Yeah, I get what you mean. So it's kind of like you don't regret it, but then if you had the choice to do that, like you probably wouldn't have made like that choice again. Interesting. So that's kind of like the background. We know a bit more about you and your primary and secondary school life. Normally for the podcast, so we move on to a part where you decide a topic that you're interested in talking more about. And you mentioned something about teachers, like that you wanted to talk more about your
And
gratitude to teachers. Was that?
yeah, so a big part of my secondary school that I feel like wouldn't have been as memorable, as enjoyable, or just how I am today wouldn't have happened without a
Mm.
lot of teachers in my school, especially the English department.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they were such a big role model to me, and they were
Mm,
such inspiration that I looked up to, so
mm,
that I feel like who I am today, who I am now, and just even getting my DSE grades and the
mm,
good grades I got wouldn't have been possible without them. So
mm. Yeah, no, it's really nice to hear that. Like, so when students appreciate the work that teachers have done, of course, like I'd like to go a bit deeper in terms of like what do you think made certain teachers really stand out for you in terms of, like you said, you looked up to them almost, right, in terms of what they did and how they conducted themselves. Was there anything in particular? I mean, of course, you can share certain teachers' names if you prefer, if you want to.
So, the first teacher who I vividly, I always looked up to, and I even still look up to today,
Mm,
is
mm,
Miss Loy.
mm,
Uh, so she was one of my leadership team teachers. So I was in
mm,
Youthity. She was in charge of Youthity, and she was overseeing me. And the reason I really looked up to her was because, to me, she was such a hardworking,
mm,
in her terms, girl boss.
mm.
Like she was so hardworking, but then also she was so nice and she was able to keep everyone in track. She was not only witty, but she was also able to I'm sorry to repeat, but she's really witty, but she's also able to
Mm,
maintain classroom management, which I find so
mm,
impressive.
mm.
And I love how the confidence she has in herself, how she presents herself, and I always look up to her. When you going back to in the beginning when you said, is it because I was tall that a lot of teachers scouted me at leadership? Miss Loy isn't really tall, but I see her as a great leader. So
Very true.
that's why I was like, leadership isn't about how you look, it's how you present yourself. And through Miss Loy, I was able to learn that. And that's why, till this day, she is such a big role model to me.
Absolutely, yeah. It seems like I think from what you said, it seems like Miss Lloyd really she kind of captured the balance between being nice to students, but also
Yeah.
being like having that strictness so that people didn't step over the line. But like you said,
Yeah.
confidence, hardworking, witty. I think all those are very nice characteristics to have as a teacher, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't just her. So a bit later on, there was Miss Chow. So
Mm,
I really admired her leadership
mm.
and her teaching ability, like her teaching style in class.
Yeah,
So her
yeah.
leadership was something I really admired because um, when you left, she took over,
Mm,
and I love that she was able to really. I think was also partly your doing as well, but you guys were able to cultivate such a nice, nurturing English environment, like an
mm.
English department that even a lot of students we really love the English department because of
Yeah.
how nurturing, how caring, and we just know. Like we don't even need to know you guys to know that you guys are really
Mm,
passionate about what you guys do and the students that you guys are teaching. So I love that you started it, but she was able to
mm.
maintain it when you left. So that's one thing that I really admired her for. And I loved that she's always seeking to improve herself, which is something
Yeah.
that I'm
Mm,
doing all the time too. And is through her, I learned to also be someone who's constantly asking for constructive criticism,
mm.
constantly trying to be a better version of myself. So Miss Chow is someone who taught me how to do that, and her teaching style class is just so fun.
Yeah, yeah.
We were able to learn so much, but in such a fun way that we didn't even realize we were learning.
Mm,
So
mm, mm,
that is something because I'm striving to be an English teacher myself. I
mm.
want to be like Miss Chow. So that
Mm.
so later on she was another role model of mine. And then lastly there is
Let me
the
just interrupt you there because just something about Miss Chow. So obviously I know her very well.
yeah,
Two things I would say. So obviously I think the department was much better in Miss Chow's leadership. So she took it on to another level. The other thing was what you mentioned about seeking constructive criticism.
yeah,
She's really the model for that. Like because as you can imagine, I went in to see a lot of her classes as part of like lesson observations. And then often I'm sat there in her classroom like thinking, oh, she teaches better than me. Like what kind of advice can I give to her? And then so, but she's always pushing me to try to see how I can help her to improve. So I definitely agree with that point. So yeah, you were about to move on to the last teacher that you wanted to talk about.
yeah. This is a teacher who I admire him for something completely different from Miss
Okay.
Chow and Miss Law, which is his um ability to connect with students. So
Mm,
Mr.
mm,
Patel is a
mm,
very good teacher to not only teaching, but just yeah, he's fairly new to teaching. He wasn't a teacher before, but
mm,
he was it was like he was made to teach because
mm.
he is someone who really cares about his students. Like he wouldn't like I'm an advocate for work social life balance. Like
Yeah.
some teachers
Mm,
don't like sharing boundaries.
mm,
I'm very an
mm.
advocate for boundaries, and I think a lot of boundaries is a great thing. But I like that Mr. Patel isn't overstepping his boundaries, but he's
Mm,
able to still connect with students and ask about them and share his personal like
mm,
antidote life, and it makes
mm.
him seem so approachable, and it makes students who are who maybe are need some help, need some
Mm,
advice, we would just gravitate towards him. Like I was someone like when I was in he came when I was in Form 4, peak of
mm.
my burnout moment. I always sought him for like advice, for help, or
Mm,
even just an ear to listen to,
mm,
because he
mm,
is someone who you can just gravitate towards, and he's just so nice, and he's just
mm,
there with you. So he is someone who, in the future when I'm a teacher, I hope to be able to connect to students like him to, like how he did and how he connected with me and his own class, and I
yeah.
hope to build a good student-teacher relationship
Mm,
through
mm,
his methods. So these are the
yeah.
three people. Of course, a lot of other people in the English department.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
There's a person here and there that kind of that I learned from them that made me who I am. But
Mm,
those
mm,
three are the main people who I would
yeah.
say like make up a lot of or helped
Yeah.
me develop myself into who I want to be and who I am today.
Sure, sure. For Mr. Patel,
Yeah.
did you meet him through the debate team, or was
I
there
am
other leadership debate
so
team, right?
firstly it was Euthany, but
Oh,
then
youth and
Miss
team.
Lloyd
Mm.
him for debate as well. So he
Yeah, yeah,
debate. So I actually got to spend a lot of
yeah, yeah, yeah,
time with him. We got to talk a lot, and that's how I realized that wow, he's great at socializing, and I want to
yeah.
be
Sure,
great.
sure. Oh, right,
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah. I was just trying to take a bit of credit for that because I took you into the debate team. No. Anyway, on the side note, like I noticed that you're very much focused on because you mentioned just now that you hope to become an English teacher, right? So it seems
yeah.
like you're very focused on how you can learn from the teachers that you have or had to help you to become a better English teacher. So along that line of thought, like when did you think, oh, maybe I could possibly become an English teacher?
It was actually a lot of like realization happened when it was peak Form 4, which is my birth
Mm,
time.
mm,
I actually wanted to be a psychologist or like a
mm,
psychiatric,
mm.
psychiatrist. Okay, just
Psychiatrist.
psychiatrist. Yes, I
Mm,
wanted to be a
mm,
psychiatrist for a while, but it was, um, but then because in Hong Kong, mental health is a bit like it's not looked at as too important. So,
mm,
thinking about it like financially and realistically, I didn't
mm,
think I would make too much money as a
mm,
psychologist. So then I
mm,
was trying to find like, a different career path that not only would I be happy in, but I would also be able to support my family
mm,
and in the future. And I realized through so when I was really like mentally drained,
mm,
the teachers, especially the ones that I mentioned, were actually there for me, and they listened to me, and they
mm,
provided
mm,
me with advice. They were there for me no matter how busy they were. Like Miss Lloyd,
mm,
super
mm,
busy, but she was always there for me.
mm,
And those are something that I would admire and I will forever be grateful for. And it was because of those moments that I realized
Mm,
I can be a I can be there for students as well. Like
mm,
the reason I wanted to be a psychologist was because I wanted to help people. I wanted to help
yeah.
students, especially.
Mm,
I wanted to listen to them, give them advice,
mm,
and I could do that through teaching, like being a
mm,
teacher. And not only would I be able to help students, I can also share my love for English to them
mm,
and um, to share like reading, to share just how to improve in English. And I think it's like killing two birds with one stone. That's how I was like, I want to,
mm.
and I want to continue the legacy that they had, like what they did. I want to continue to do that for the next generations to come.
That's
So
brilliant. Mm.
that was my epiphany, my realization that
Mm, yeah,
I should.
I mean, it seems like that Form 4 year was so important to you in terms of making you realize a lot of different things about how much you can manage, but also what you want to do in the future as well. Um,
Yeah.
just now you mentioned your plan or hope to become an English teacher. So we've also mentioned at the start your brilliant English results, and you mentioned your love for English. Do you have any tips for people who are listening, like in terms of how you improved your English? Like, so it seems like you spoke a lot and you went to a lot of tutorials in primary. Did you continue this
Oh
in
no, no,
secondary?
really early on, like
Like,
elementary-ish.
oh, even like kindergarten times, right?
Yeah.
How about like in secondary? Was there something in particular that you did to maintain your love for English and how you kind of really push yourself to improve in English?
So I'm never someone who did tutorials because
Mm,
my cousin did tutorial for like a long time, but in the
mm,
end didn't get the results he wants. So I was like, tutorials are useless. So I don't do
mm,
tutorials.
mm, mm,
Instead, I like to utilize the resources I have in school. So
mm,
school teachers, they're still here after school. So
mm,
if you ask the English teachers constantly, I would ask them, "Hey, can I get some extra work? Hey, can I get some reading
mm,
comprehension, listening?" Oh my God, Miss
mm,
Chow was there when I was constantly, especially like Form 4, Form 5, Form 6. I was asking
mm.
Miss Chow for extra work for so many times that she ran out of extra work for me because um I like to, I think through practice, I like the motto practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
So I want to constantly practice and make sure that I'm improving. I want to get some feedback on like, oh, how I can improve. And Miss Chow is so good at giving feedback that
Mm,
I can't not ask her for extra work sometimes
mm,
because I want
mm,
to
mm,
get the feedback and I want to see how I can improve and do better.
mm,
So how I improved my English, I think, was mostly that my willingness to go out and put more do extra work and put more effort into English.
mm,
And that's I think that was a key thing to why I was able to get the grade that I want was because of good feedback from teachers, which is a main
mm.
thing, like
Yeah.
good feedback, but also my own willingness and determination to improve and to put work, like to do a lot of hard work. So I
Yeah,
think those
sure.
two are really important to wanting to improve your grades or
Mm.
yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. And did you have anything to add that you haven't said so far in terms of how much teachers influence you at school? Because it seems like first you really appreciate that the influence that or the teachers that you met, right? But also it seems like you kind of took a little bit of something from each teacher you've met along the way.
I think to add, mm, I feel like I've said a lot. Like I've already said a lot of great things about them, and like how it really shows that inspiration or like just being there for students and listening to them can really impact a student's life. And
Mm,
I think as a teacher, it's good to teach, but another way is also connecting with students and listening to them is also such a big part of teaching that I think some
mm,
teachers um, don't or some teachers just prefer to be more like talk would
mm,
be limited to subject based, but I think teaching
mm.
is far more than just teaching your subject. Is also about
The
it
connection, right?
teaches the connections and revolving around like how can I help a student be the best that they can when they leave the school. I think that's also
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. And you kind of answered my next question, but you could see if you have anything else to share about that because it seems like you have really strong internal drive to do well. I would say particularly in English, right? Where do you think that came from? Was that partly because of your teachers too?
Um, I think it came from because I'm an overachiever.
Mm.
I'm someone who, when um when I get good grades, I want to maintain it all the time, and I want to
Mm.
constantly. And in a way, especially before, I was really competitive.
Mm.
So, and a lot of my friends were also academically really well. So I wanted to be
Mm.
like, I want to be academically well too. So I would
Mm.
constantly work towards being improving
Mm.
myself better. And at a point it wasn't healthy, so I don't encourage being too competitive, but a bit of
Mm.
competitive.
Mm.
And also the fact that I was an overachiever, it was like I was constantly telling myself, you gotta do better, you gotta do better, you gotta improve. So in a way, it was like me motivating myself to work,
Mm.
but I wouldn't say it was the healthiest way to do it.
So probably a better way is to look for healthy competition where you're kind of pushing each other in a good way, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready to move on to some quick fire questions?
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, we've kind of touched on it, but maybe you might have a different answer. But how did teachers describe you back in secondary school?
I love the word workaholic because
You are, yeah, absolutely.
if I wasn't doing academics, you would see me after school working on meetings with school teams and
Mm,
all that.
mm.
Teachers are constantly seeing me running around school doing other work, and there were a period of time where I even left later than teachers, like left school. So definitely workaholic would be one thing
Mm.
that
Yeah, definitely agree with that. What do you think schools or teachers should do more of?
I think connecting with students. Like I
Mm,
said before, some teachers they have really strong boundaries, which is like a
mm,
good thing. Like, I think it's great to have boundaries as a teacher and a student. But then
mm,
sometimes when your walls are so tall that
mm,
students can't, like, you're not saying anything about yourself, you're not trying to listen to students. It makes
mm,
it seem like a robot is teaching you, and in
mm,
a way, it kind of makes the subject a bit duller because you're like, oh, my
mm,
teaching whatever's in the textbook. It's not fun to learn this subject. So, but when you connect with students, when you share some of your personal stories through teaching and you listening to them and you're having
mm.
students discuss about their life, it makes your teaching more livelier and
Yeah.
it promotes socializing with your classmates and your teachers as well. And
Mm,
it builds a nicer and more positive learning environment. So I think teachers should have boundaries. Boundaries is a great thing,
mm,
but sometimes it's okay to lower them a little bit when you find
mm,
appropriate and
mm.
share some stories and connect with your students would be
Yeah,
something.
yeah, definitely. How about doing less of then?
Expectations. I think
Mm,
some teachers subconsciously have expectations of some students. So when I was in secondary school, because I was known as the leadership student,
mm,
so there were expectations on me that I could feel. Like some teachers don't
mm,
realize they have expectations on you, but
mm,
you can feel it, and it's a pressure that it's
mm,
an external pressure that is just sometimes really suffocating. And
mm,
even it wasn't just leadership team. Sometimes even in academics, when a student's doing well,
mm,
and suddenly maybe they did a bit not as well as they did before,
mm,
some teachers would have like comments such as, "Oh no, what happened? Like you used to be so well." These comments, it,
mm,
it kind of um lowers the student's self-esteem, and it kind of hurts us when some
mm.
teachers point that out because like
Yeah,
we
yeah.
also know doing so well, and having your teacher point it out to you kind of like it's like another like salt in the wound. So sometimes
Mm,
rather than pointing out like, oh no, what happened? Like you used to do so well, you can maybe be like, is everything okay? How can I support you? How can
mm.
I help you find a way to get back to where you were before? Or
Right, right.
maybe they're going through something, maybe just ask them how they're doing. A lot of that could be different, and it's not, you're not doing it, you're helping them not in a way that is damaging their self-esteem or self-confidence. So I think that is one thing.
Mm. Okay, that's a very good point. Yeah. How about any tools or activities that particularly helped you learn better? I mean, you can focus on English if you want to, but if you want to, you can also focus on like just learning in general.
I think it's not tools or activities, it's more of I think what really helped me was that even after lesson hours, some teachers are
Mm.
willing to help me help, like for example, Miss Chow will help me grade extra work.
Yeah, yeah.
Um I went to find some teachers after school or during recess, they're willing to help me and not just be like that I'm out of hours. Like this is my rest time.
Mm,
Don't.
mm, mm,
I think
mm, mm.
these are really a great way to help students who are actually like really motivated to trying to do better,
Yeah.
to do better. Rather than when a student's trying to find you and ask you for help outside of school hours, you shut them
Mm,
off. It really kills
mm.
off motivation to like do better because you're like, oh, my teachers don't care about me. Why am I trying so hard then? So I
Yeah.
think rather than a tool activity, I think teachers being willing to stay a bit longer or
Mm, mm, mm,
yeah, a few more extra hands is a
mm.
great, a big reason why I was able to improve
Yeah,
academic.
yeah. Sure. And I guess like you mentioned earlier, like it was the feedback, like really the one-to-one feedback, very pinpointed in terms of what you're good at and possibly things to improve on that really helped you, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, given that you've had so many different experiences at school, the next one should be quite an easy one for you. So do you have any funny, strange, scary, touching moments that happened? You might have too many, not sure which one to pick.
I was thinking like, where do I want to go for this? Like, do I want to go touching or do I want to go?
Up to
Uh,
you. This is your episode.
I think, um, okay, I think I want to talk about something that would be more like in point with what I was talking about, which is teachers like help, which is like, um, I constantly refer back to the point like my form four, form five, where I was
Yeah,
like really,
yeah.
that
Mm,
was such a pivotal moment of my life. It was even actually like a moment where I was like, in a way, very suicidal at
mm,
that
mm,
time.
mm,
And
mm,
it was actually thanks to teachers who were there for me that actually helped me get out of that mindset. And
mm.
like, so that's why I say it's so important for teachers to be there for students and actually listen to them, because it was some teachers who like saw that I was like not who I was.
Yeah.
They used to,
Mm,
a teacher used to like before told me like, you look like there was no soul behind your eyes. And I was like,
mm,
just the fact that some teachers see it and they point it out, it's already like something that us students, or us who are really struggling are
yeah.
like thankful for, because it
Mm,
shows that,
mm,
oh, notice someone cares. And then when
mm,
they even go out of the way to like sit you down, talk with you, and like go and like even when you in times of need, you run to them and they're not like brushing you off, and they're like, yes, I'm gonna be here for you. I'm gonna sit here with you however long you need. So important. And a lot of the teachers that I mentioned, the English department especially, were there for me. It wasn't just a few
mm,
teachers, just them, but like I think the department had their own,
mm,
had a hand in helping me pull me out of that mindset and make sure that I was improving mentally. So I
mm.
was saying, touching story was that, what was this
Yeah.
basically, basically pulling me out of darkness. And
Mm,
um like without them, I would say, like, some people say maybe it's a bit overdramatic, but I feel like genuinely without them I
mm,
wouldn't be here right now, because there was
mm,
literally a phase in my life where I didn't think I was getting to be an adult. Like, I'm 18
mm,
now, and at this
mm.
point in my time I never thought that I would grow up to be 18. So
Wow. Mm.
thanks to them, very thank you to them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I thank you for being so brave to share that because I'm sure it's easy to talk about now, I guess, right? But when you were going through it, I'm sure it must have been really dark, like you said. And I'm
I
glad you
The reason I'm willing to share, because I know I wasn't the only one, and
mm,
I'm hoping me sharing this can not only inspire teachers to be more observant with their
mm,
students and actually willing to reach out, but also
mm,
to students to know that, like,
mm,
it's
mm,
not only the people who are failing school or people who are mostly in the background, like everyone could be
mm.
going through something.
Yeah.
And okay, to like, I think it's like really important to, if you don't want to reach out to your friends, your
Mm,
teachers, reach out to your teachers is such a
yeah.
great support.
Yeah, and that's actually such a good point because sometimes teachers might neglect the students who seem to be like thriving, right? So you were in leadership positions, you probably doing quite well academically as well, but maybe it's sometimes these students who are the ones who really, really need some help, but more mentally and psychologically help from your teachers, right? Right. Thank you for sharing that. And what's one question you have for me?
Because I know that you went from secondary school to university. I was like,
Mm,
what is biggest difference between teaching secondary school students to like, or like just not the difference, but
Mm.
like what is the big change you had to navigate between teaching secondary school to
Yeah.
teaching
Yeah, sure. So I guess the biggest change is really the relationships. I mean, you mentioned the connection earlier, right? I think just I enjoy secondary because of that relationship you get to build with students from Form 4 up to all the way to Form 6. And it's such a nice thing to see, like when you go through a full cycle. So we often talk about the cycle from Form 4 to Form 6, to see that, and then you really get to know students so well. Like so, by Form 5, like when you start, like let's say it's my class teacher class, right? I don't need to go through routines and rules again, like because they know who I am, I know them, and so it's so much better to teach and easier to teach. University, like obviously we might meet students only. Often we just meet students once a week. Some students we only meet once a semester, like depending whether they turn up for the lecture or not. So it becomes much more difficult to get to know students. So I try to navigate around that. So I mean, I give them like exit tickets and give them a chance to tell them a bit more about themselves, so that I can use that information to teach them better. So I definitely think that the relationship thing it's much more difficult to build a positive relationship with the students at university. Yeah. Thank you for your question. And I guess my last question for you, I mean, you've already talked about teachers you remember uh, that you want to thank. Maybe if you could approach school in a different way, was there anything that you think you might change?
I would be less harsh on myself because
Mm,
I feel like I was really hard on myself to like be good or like be up to par to a lot of my friends, be up to
mm,
par to the expectations that teachers had on me. Maybe I would relax a bit and actually enjoy. I wouldn't say I didn't enjoy my secondary school life. I love my not love, but my secondary school
mm,
life was it was better than primary. But
mm.
I feel like there were some times where I feel like I was really harsh on myself, where I wouldn't like relax, and it
Yeah.
made a lot of things less enjoyable. So I feel like if I were to go back, I would calm down a bit. 'Cause, yeah,
Mm.
that was the thing a lot of teachers said as well. But we need to calm down, and I was like, yeah, I would calm down a bit and like actually be a kid and like be a student and be like enjoy secondary school life. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming onto the podcast as well. So it's been such a pleasure learning about your journey. So like honestly, I was a bit surprised when you told me that you were the kid trying to fit in or in the background in primary, because the Bobo that we knew was a leader. And so just taking us through that journey, but also through the downs as well, like you mentioned, the S4, all those difficulties and troubles. But I think the biggest thing to take out from this episode is really just how much gratitude you have for your teachers. So I would like to leave the last word for you. Anything that you want to say to anyone else, or any of the teachers?
Um, the English department, thank you for everything. To some teachers like Miss Chow, Miss Loy, Mr. Patel, Miss Toe, Miss Choi, thank you for making me who I am, and I will forever be grateful for you guys. Yeah. Good luck in whatever you guys do in the future.
My two key takeaways from that conversation with Bobo are that firstly, it might be the high achievers or overachievers who really need that extra emotional or psychological support from teachers. They might be thriving on the outside or academically, but they might be struggling on the inside. The second thing is just how much Bobo appreciated the help and the support that she got from her teachers, and how much she learned from each teacher that she met along the way. Don't we all want to nurture more students like Bobo? I hope you enjoyed listening to Bobo's extraordinary story, and please do join us again next time on Ordinary Teachers and Students.